OOPS means object oriented programming structure. So in this OOPS, there are six principles. Let's say first class, object, and polymorphism, inheritance, encapsulation, abstraction. So these are the six principles of OOPS. In this, we'll see the first two, what is class and object meaning. Okay. And how a project is done in Java with what technologies. So if I consider an object, in real time, we say it as an real world entity. Let's say a pen is there, laptop is there, fan is there. These are all objects which are visible to you. So what is object which exists physically? So the things which you are able to see is an object. And how do you identify that it's a pen or a laptop? Based on its properties. Every object will have some properties so that you can identify, and it performs some action. Like pen we can use to write. And here, what is not an object? Object means which exists physically. And what is not an object means which doesn't exist physically. Example, you can say air. You haven't seen air, right? Or energy, thoughts. These doesn't exist. So let's give a category like which doesn't exist. I'll say it as class. Which exists, I'll say it as object. Two things. So if I say apple is there, is it a object or a class? Can you answer?
Object.
And fruit is there. Is it a class or object?
Class.
Yes.
Yeah, because fruit doesn't exist. And if it is a mango,
Object.
object. So if I take a rose, rose is a class or object?
Class.
See, have you seen a rose or not? You have seen a rose. What you
It's a
haven't
kind.
seen, flower. So flower is a category and a rose is an object. So
Oh,
flower
rose.
is a,
Sorry. Okay.
yeah, flower is a class. Let's say person. Now, person is a class or object,
Class.
right? So if I just say Rahul is a class or object,
Object.
Object.
yeah. Now we know that every object has some properties and it can perform some action. So what are the properties of a person or Rahul?
Name, gender.
Yes, name, age, height, weight, gender, color, all this comes under properties. What actions a person make? He can eat, he can walk, talk, read, right? So in a general aspect, we have discussed like person is a class and Rahul is an object. Name, age are the properties, and eat and walk are the actions. Let's write a program for this in Java. So in Java, mostly we write classes. So how to write a class here? What is a class here? Person is a class, right? And any language will have some data type, like age is a integer, height is a float value. Okay, so if you don't know int and float, I'll explain again in the later sessions regarding the data types. So these int and float are the variables in Java, like age, height, what we have declared are nothing but the variables in Java. And also we'll have void eat, void walk. These are actions or known as methods in Java. Okay. So what is void? Why we are giving the parenthesis? At the time of methods explanation, I'll give. Okay. Just it's a collection of properties and action, or you can say it's a collection of variables and methods. Because for class, we can have several definitions. First, what you can say, collection of objects. Because fruit is a class and mango and apple are the objects. Or what we can say, collection of properties and action. So here properties indicates the variables, action indicates the methods. So collection of variables and methods. Any doubts till now? Garrett or Kirti?
Sorry, yeah, one thing you said methods and what was the other one? It's a collection of methods and what?
Variables.
Variables and methods. Okay.
Yeah, these are known as variables and these are known as methods. Just a terminology. Okay, we can call it as functions also, but in Java we call them as methods.
Okay.
Now we have seen that class doesn't exist, right? It means inside Java, when you write a class, the memory is not allocated. For this person, there is no memory allocated. And inside that, whatever we have written, like the variables and the methods, no bytes are allocated. And without memory, we can't store any values. Let's say if I want to store age equals to 22, I need to have some bytes, because in RAM, if I want to save any value, I need some memory. And that memory itself is not allocated for the entire class. Why? Because the memory has to be allocated by creating a object. Okay. So let's consider here Rahul is an object. What do you mean by object? In RAM, some bytes will be allocated for age, height, eat, walk. That entire memory has been named as Rahul. Okay. And now, if I want to store the value inside age, I can't do it directly. Like age equals to 22. Again, there is no memory for age. The memory is there for Rahul. And inside Rahul, we have a age location. So Rahul dot age is 22. What happens inside Rahul memory? The age will be stored as 22. Okay. So is it clear or any doubts?
Yeah, I got you.
Kirti, what about you?
Yeah. So void eat is a method you said. So anytime you call a method, you need to write this. Void is a, what is void exactly?
Yeah, that I'll explain at the time of explaining the methods, right? It takes a lot of time.
Okay.
Just assume that eat. Don't think about void or the parentheses. Just think that eat as a action. So Rahul is eating, Rahul age, Rahul height. So what is Rahul here? It's a memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you have understood?
Yeah, yeah.
Next.
Yeah, I'm good.
So if I create another memory, see here I've created person Rahul, it's fine. Now let's say I'll create person Shiva. So what happens? A memory will be allocated. And now, can I store age equals to 32? Is it possible?
Yes.
But which is the memory? Is it Rahul or is it Shiva?
Shiva.
So you need to mention it, right?
Yes.
Because if you don't mention, the machine can't understand directly. Without memory, it can't store.
Oh, gotcha.
So if we give just age equal 32, it doesn't store, or it will be storing in Rahul?
It doesn't store.
Doesn't store it all.
It doesn't have any memory itself, right? So it doesn't
Mhm.
exist. That's the reason we are saying class doesn't exist. So machine can't even recognize it. It will give error.
Mhm.
Okay. So whenever you want to use a class variable or a method or the properties or action, you need to have some memory. And why we do all these things, why we are doing it, consider here age. How many times I have declared? Only once, right?
Yeah.
I'm able to use that age 2 times
Mhm.
based on the two memories, Rahul memory and Shiva memory.
Yeah.
The advantage here is the variables or the methods are declared only once. We are writing them only once, and we are able to access them a repeated number of times based on the memories or the objects. Okay.
Okay.
So write once, use n number of times based on the n number of objects. That's the reason we named it as OOPS, object oriented. Everything revolves around the object itself. How many lines of code you write, if you don't create object, it is of no use. Okay.
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 Right. So that's class and object, just an introduction, because if you have understood this concept in Java, we can move forward and write any program. Every day you'll write a class, you'll write a variable, you write a method, you write the object creation. On this, the remaining concepts are revolved. So any doubts you can ask, or else I'll move to the next thing.
Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, we can move.
Yeah, thanks. So next, let's consider you have a Facebook login page and how it goes to the home page. Let's say I have two text boxes at the login page, right? You have logged into Facebook, right? So two text box will be there at the time of login. And a login button will be there. Now, to design this text box and the button, usually we have to learn HTML. Hypertext markup language. It contains of the tags to design this page. But if you want to apply some styles and the coloring part, you need to use the CSS, cascading style sheet. And if you want to apply some validations, consider without the username and password, if I click on login, it'll ask, please enter username and password. Next, if I don't give the email properly, again it will give the message, please enter proper email. So these things are developed using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And above them, we have a framework known as React. So React is a framework which customizes this development of pages. Okay, like a single page application. So we'll discuss what is that single page application all later. But here, this part is clear. What is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next, we have a storage area, because at the time of registration, you give the username, password, email, phone number. These details are getting stored somewhere, right? For storage, we use database. And here, database means we have Oracle database, MySQL database, Postgres, SQL. All these are being used in the projects. Okay. So what is database? Just to store the values you are entering in the text box, we use this database. And in between the HTML page and the database, we'll have a server, or you can say it's a container, which consists of a web server. So what the web server will do, and what are the server-side technologies, we have to see. Like it's a web server. And here we'll have server-side technologies. So we can write some code, and what language we are using, those are mentioned here. Okay. So what is a web server? Before going to web server, you need to understand there are two kinds of pages. One is static page, one is dynamic page. So the login page, you will see it won't change. Every day, the page will show the same two text box and a button. That's a static page, which doesn't change based on request. So what is dynamic? Suppose your exam results were there, right? When you entered the hall ticket number, it showed a result to you. And for every hall ticket number, you will have different results. Or the flight status, you can just have the PNR number, and based on that, every flight will have a different status. So web server can handle only static requests. Means it cannot go to the database directly. A best example for this, like consider a bank. When you go to a bank and you need a particular account, you have several departments in that bank, and every department will have their own work, and you need to visit those departments to complete the task. The same way here, this department is known as front end. It's a front end department, and this is a database or storage, you can say storage. And this is a backend technologist, what we are saying, server-side technologist. So what's happening here? Web server cannot take these values, like we write the username and we write the password, right? These values it cannot carry to the database. Then what the web server is doing? It's giving these values to the server-side technologies. So what are the server-side technologies in Java? You have first servlets, and JSP. So servlets and JSP had some drawbacks. To overcome that, they introduced Spring Framework. It's a framework. Framework in the sense already some code will be written. You can utilize that code. A best example, in your mobiles, you have seen some predefined text will be there. I'll call you later. Uh, I'm busy right now. Can't talk. So these things are already defined and kept inside the mobile. You're just using them. The same way, framework indicates that boilerplate code, which is already written, and you can just directly use them. Okay. So Spring Framework again had a enhancement, and they introduced Spring Boot. So on the Spring Framework, the Spring Boot was developed. Okay. So what's the problem with servlets and JSP? You can say, like for login, you need to write a servlet. For registration, you need to write a servlet. Suppose I have 1,000 pages, you need to write 1,000 servlets. So what happens? It's a lot of files and it gets clumsy. Whereas Spring Framework doesn't require 1,000 files like that. What you can do in a single file, you can have multiple things like registration, login, and profile and logout in a single class. Other functionalities in other classes. That is the advantage of Spring Framework. Okay. So what we use these technologies for, that values, username and password, what you are given cannot travel to the database directly through web server. So you give it to this Spring Framework. Spring Framework or the servlets and JSP or the Spring Boot can handle the dynamic request. Means what? They can't interact with the database. So again, what is required? We required a technology which can handle the database. With servlets and JSP, we can use JDBC, or we have a framework known as Hibernate framework. Okay. So first you will be learning JDBC, then you will go to the Hibernate framework. So here the values are given to the database, checked. It is checking whether the values exist or not. If it exists, those are given to the server-side technologies. It will develop a page or it will redirect to the home page. So this you can say it as home page. Who is giving that home page? Web server itself. Okay. Any doubts you can ask.
Yeah, I have a question. How about, so like is the JSP and Spring Boot all compatible with React and JavaScript, or what about Node? Is that kind of a same thing or different?
Yeah, parallelly, instead of Spring and all, you can have a backend as Node or Node.js, you can say, or you can have ASP.NET, or you can have PHP, or you can have Django for Python. So these are the parallel things. Means either any of the thing you can learn. But what is the advantage with Java is it's open source and it supports the web services. It's very secure because we have the Spring security. We use different security concepts. So it's way more secure than other languages here. That's the reason a lot of companies are still using Java, Spring Framework, Spring Boot. And after introducing the Spring Boot, it is way easier to write the code in Java.
So then if you're using Spring Framework and Spring Boot, what would you use on the front end? Could you use any of those technologies or
React or only HTML, CSS or jQuery, Bootstrap, and we have Angular also, or Vue.js is there. Any of the front end is fine, because if you
Okay.
learn React, Angular and Vue will be similar. Same kind of concept here,
Okay, thank you.
because all projects won't be on React itself, right? Some uses Angular, some uses Vue, but the perspective will be same. Okay, any other doubts, Katie?
You said the web server can only handle the static request, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's nothing. When it comes to dynamic, it is different thing.
Dynamic, that is done by the server-side technologies, right? These server-side technologies or the backend, they are handling the dynamic request. So they take these values and check whether the database contains these values or not. Based on that, either it will redirect to home page or login page.
Okay.
And not only this, we'll be learning the Git concept, like versioning, because a lot of developers will be there in the company, how they will have a single location for the project. It's Git desktop will install, and whatever the codes you will do, you will push it into the Git. And we'll be learning like Maven tools, and we have Postman for the REST API. So we'll be seeing the REST API also, which is a very important concept. Okay. So these are all things we'll be covering in the sessions apart from this. So you will be learning the front end, you will be learning the server-side technologies, you will be learning the database, you will learn the Oracle, MySQL or Post. Any one will be similar. Like if you learn the MySQL commands, it will be similar to other databases. Slight changes will be there. That's it.
What about NoSQL? Is that something to learn or not? We don't need to learn.
No. If you learn the MySQL commands, then you will understand that NoSQL also. It will be what similar. Like 70 to 80% every database commands will be similar. Only the 10 to 20% will change.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll start from the Java, that core Java, then we'll go to the HTML parallelly, like 1 hour for this and other for the servlets and JSP. Then Spring Framework, database, Hibernate, all these things we'll cover. Any other doubts, anyone?
Not from my side.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah. So how was the session?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, good to know all those things that we are planning to learn.
Yeah.
So the SOAP and REST are the same. SOAP and REST API integration.
Yes.
Are they different?
No, similar, but in the market, SOAP is not being used. We are more focusing on the REST.
Okay, these are the main skills they are asking in the market. I feel like integrations.
Yes. So these are the current. That's the reason I included React, not the Angular and Vue. There's a current market technologies in the US.
Yeah.